This will win or lose the football game, and again, it will be Christie as the lone deep back.
Third down and 10, 4-down territory.
Flips it, dangerous, but Joey O'Brien has it. And like this, you're going to need those plays to go your way.
Oh my goodness.
Welcome back to another edition of Soft Talk with the head coach of the LaSalle Explorers, Brett Gordon. All these episodes brought to you by the class of 1998 12th Man Club. They're excited to support their classmate, Brett Gordon, support the program, and help us a little bit as well as we look to bring you this content every week. And that's where I got to put my hand up. Last 2 weeks have been very challenging on the professional front, in a very good way, by the way. But Brett, I appreciate you sticking with us, and sorry to the LaSalle faithful that we haven't had this out the last 2 weeks, but we're going to make it all worth it in this next 15 to 20 minutes. So Brett, thanks again for doing this, and a big week ahead.
Yeah, certainly a week that we all knew was coming. I think it's interesting as I take kind of a snapshot of where we are, how we got here, and what we talked to the players about as far as how fast time goes, especially for this group of seniors. To realize here we're on the brink of 4 or 5 days away from essentially a playoff game where it's win or go home. So we're excited for the challenge, and also making sure that we kind of cherish these special moments that we know are going to be important memories moving forward.
In the time since we did one of these Chalk Talk editions, we've had Senior Day, last home regular season game, of course, the last regular season game for these seniors when you guys played at Father Judge, and now you move into a St. Joe's Prep week. But let's start with the last 2 or 3 weeks and what some of those emotions were like, what you saw out of your guys as you were balancing, again, the emotion of playing, say, a last home regular season game, a last regular season game, but also trying to get better every single week.
Yeah, if you just look at the way the schedule played out this week, and I can't remember exactly when the last time we spoke on here, but if I look at just the last 3 games, the Bonner week, then going into the O'Hara week, and then into the Judge week, as we assessed kind of the schedule and we're trying to figure out how we were going to handle, I'll call it the home stretch here, we thought it was very important to keep the intensity up at practice. You've heard me talk for a long time now about the importance of peaking at the right time. And some of those things are out of your control when you really look at it. And what I mean by that is, every football team's facing its own unique set of circumstances as the season goes on. Some are fighting the injury bug, others are fighting the injury bug, but also hopeful that those people negatively impacted can get back in time. So trying to balance all that and at the same time build some depth. One of the Not that there's ever any positives about having some bumps and bruises, but what it does do is give other folks an opportunity to get in and get valuable practice time. So we're hopeful over the last 3 to 4 week stretch that due to some of the injuries we've had, we've been able to get some other guys some real quality reps and ready to go. And then as I look at the future, the plan and the hope is that we're going to show up Saturday afternoon at Villanova Stadium, and be fresh mentally, fresh physically, and ready to make a run at this thing.
Last year, and just to give a little bit of background for folks that might be newer to this, we transitioned from a PCL Red division, which is comprised of 4A, 5A, and 6A teams. You don't play a true playoff in the way that historically the Catholic League has, because in order to get to a district championship game against the 6A representative from the public league on November 15th, you basically need to get right into classification play. And so the regular season title is determined, and that's how the hubcap's awarded. We'll get to that in a second. But we have known for months that St. Joe's Prep LaSalle would be the game, the 6A classification game. We knew it would either be this week or next week. And so Last year, it was a week bye after the regular season ends, and this year it's the week after the regular season. So, any adjustments to that, and maybe just a thought on knowing about this game or knowing that it would be happening since last November?
Yeah, I mean, candidly, I'm not a big fan of the setup within the PIAA currently. That's just my honest feedback. When you have a situation of, and I don't know how St. Joe's feels about it, but the idea that we have to play each other in a first round playoff game, given the traditions of the program, I think is unfortunate. All that being said, and what I mean by that is it kind of makes, in my opinion, most of the regular season pretty trivial, knowing that this game, is going to be played. It's been on the calendar for over a month now, and knowing that this is really the game that you have to win. And I know they're in the same boat. So you try to prepare yourselves all season long and stay focused on the importance of week to week. Um, we certainly would, I would like to think we learned a lot about this game last year. To your point, there was a bye leading into that game last year. This year, there is not. I'd like to think right now, with how the season has played out, my preference would be to play the game this week as it is scheduled. Um, I don't know. I don't know if the bye hurt us or helped us last year, but I certainly can't make an argument that it helped us last year. Um, so yeah, I mean it's the PIAA discussion is really a separate one. Our main focus is we're here. I'd like to think up to this point, I would define our season as a successful one, but we all know that with the expectations for this team and how we've worked and how we've positioned ourselves, we certainly don't want it to end this coming Saturday.
I'll add just a little bit of context and editorialize, and you certainly don't need to comment more on this, but just for the folks listening, other sports like basketball, soccer, baseball, you'll get multiple teams per district to qualify for a state playoff. And then one team will get shipped out west, and the other team from the same district might be out east. And districts like District 12 will get 12 teams and a 32 team basketball bracket. And so they're filtered all throughout. Football, unlike that, is you play all the way to a district championship. So there's technically only one team that will play an inter district matchup per district. So what I mean by that is District 1 is so big that their champion is spit out in the state semifinal. District 11's champion is spit out in the state quarterfinal, and District 12's is also spit out in the state quarterfinal. And that's basically the eastern half of the bracket, right? A District 12 champ plays a District 11 champ in a quarterfinal, and the winner goes to play the winner of District 1 in a state semifinal, and the winner of that plays a District 3 or District 7 or District 6 type representative in the 6A final. And so there is no situation where St. Joe's Prep could meet LaSalle in a state semifinal or even a state final. It's all adjudicated at a district level, and then there's one rep per district effectively once that district championship's adjudicated. So yes, Brad, right, this game will always be at this point on the calendar so long as the Catholic League only has these two 6A representatives. That could change with enrollment, et cetera. But as it stands right now, and with all due respect to the rest of the state, you have two of the best teams in the state, anywhere you slice it, playing a game that should be a state semi or state final in early November. And there's nothing that can be done about that under the PIAA's current regulations and current bracket, but that's the context that you were talking about, Brett. Let's double back to the regular season quickly, because as I hinted at, the hubcap, the Philadelphia Catholic League trophy, is determined in the regular season now for all the reasons we just mentioned. You can't play a league playoff with 4A, 5A, and 6A teams in time to get to that District 6A championship on November 15th. So you guys won a Philadelphia Catholic League championship for the third time in 5 years. How does that feel? And I'll let you put any additional context on that you'd like as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's not the ultimate goal that we're looking for. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we're have the proper perspective on accomplishing certain things. So, because of the nature to your description of the regular season Catholic League champions, if you will, for the Red Division, um, and in particular this year when it really came down to a tiebreaker between three teams. If I'm being honest, it doesn't have quite the excitement that maybe last year's had when it was capping off a undefeated regular season. Felt a little bit different. I also would say the reason it feels a little bit different this year is I think the way the team has handled expectations of what our ultimate goals are. Winning a regular season Catholic League championship is nice, and it's certainly, to your point, 3 and 5 years and two in a row. Those are things we'll be proud of. Much more likely long term. But right now, it's not the team's focus. I was actually really interested slash proud of how the kids handled it on Friday night, knowing that by securing the victory against Father Judge, that was most likely going to secure the regular season championship. There was very little discussions around that. We handled it accordingly, and we decided that in the future there'll be opportunities to potentially celebrate that. But right now, it was not a it was certainly a goal as part of the bigger picture, but not one we're going to celebrate just yet.
Let's switch gears a little bit here. A young man who is a terrific player, student, has a great family, and has an incredible career here at LaSalle, flipped his commitment. John Patrick Oates, JP, from Temple to James Madison, and James Madison is kind of on top of the world from a group of five standpoint, and a team that came up from the FCS years ago, a bona fide big time Division I FBS program. And I'm really, really excited for JP. I do want to ask you though, in a situation like JP, where he commits to a school that's on the rise like JMU, often that's because of a very successful coach like Bob Chesney. Gavin Sidwar commits to Missouri. That is growing leaps and bounds in a big way because of a terrific coach like Eli Drinkwitz. In a unprecedented year of coach firings at the highest level of the Power Five, those are two guys that, whether they decide to leave or not, will absolutely be the belle of the ball and will be a big target for these schools. And so I'm going to ask you more of an existential question as a coach and a guy that coaches these young men and a guy that knows these families well and has had a hand in the recruiting process. How do you, the families, and the young men manage? I'll put it this way: the fact that these young men have been so talented and so good to put themselves in this type of position to play at these types of schools, where naturally, heck, even Gavin or even Grayson McHugh and Joey O'Brien, like people are calling their coach Marcus Freeman. Now, very likely that he stays. How do you guys manage something like that a month and a half from signing day, knowing all the uncertainty that's out there?
Yeah, so I would first answer that by saying not a lot of discussions currently related to the, I'll call it the college topic, if you will. Um, but certainly you bring up a good point, and we keep talking about this ever-changing landscape in college football, which is getting crazy, quite frankly, with what you're seeing. My guidance to the individual players and to the families has always been do the best you can to make sure that the decisions and the commitments you're making, as much as football is a big part of it, you got to make the decision because at the end of the day, it's still a school that you feel good about, whether it's the campus, the setting, whatever it may be, academically, all that stuff plays into the decision. And knowing that nothing is certain. What we're learning in this day of college football is everything changes constantly. Um, you bring up JP's situation. JP's a kid who has played a number of different positions over his 4 years at LaSalle. And I think part of what you're seeing with him is, he's now starting to see his potential in various roles kind of come to life, which is giving him more exposure and certainly more opportunities. JP, his first 2 years at LaSalle was a wide receiver. His last year was exclusively kind of a tight end slot for us, which he continues to be this year. And now we're incorporating him into the defensive plan, which I'm learning very quickly is catching the eye of a lot of college programs because they're looking at body types and sheer athleticism, which JP checks all those boxes. And now that there's some evidence and proof out there that, wow, this kid at 6'3", 225 who can run, like now maybe we ought to consider him for something else. So I think that's what you saw here with the JMU opportunity. These coaches can come and go. So back to my earlier point, you got to make the decision that's in the best interest for you. And as much as a lot of these kids commit to programs and individual coaches, you do have to go in with an eyes wide open mindset that could change. And sometimes that could change for the better, meaning if a head coach that you commit to ends up bumping up to a different school and even different level, there'll be potential opportunities to go with them. Look no further than what Kurt Signetti at Indiana did last year. He was the head coach at JMU, pretty low on the radar, so to speak, from the national lens. Gets hired at Indiana, takes almost, I think it was something of 20 players from JMU that follow him to Indiana, and the majority of those guys ended up being heavy contributors. So I think the biggest thing that you can continue to do, and the counsel that I would give, is you just have to kind of mentally prepare that anything can happen. And it's not a great answer, but knowing and setting expectations that this is all great right now, but to your point, it can change quickly. Let's prepare for the fact that something may change, and then maybe have, plan B somewhere in the background in a worst case scenario. That's really all we can do.
Is the college to high school calendar broken, Brett? And I'll add a little bit more context to that. Is the calendar broken in that the regular season is going to end in late November, conference championship week, the first week of December? That next Tuesday is signing day. The signing day used to be the first Tuesday in February. Now it's bumped up to the early period. That's also when a lot of the coaching hires and fires will occur, at least the hires on the back end of the coaches that were fired at those schools. Then there's the transfer portal that occurs during bowl season, but before the college football playoff that doesn't end until January 20th. Is the calendar broken?
There's too many moving parts at the same time between the high school signees, the timing of the playoffs, the timing of the signing deadline, the timing of the transfer portal. None of it really adds up. And what you end up having is, in my opinion, primarily the high school kids are the ones that are suffering the most, because what ends up happening is as these portals open up and change, that focus for the college program shifts primarily to the portal and making sure that they're plugging holes and gaps on their roster, where the high school kids now have become a second and third priority in most cases. And now what you see, the acceleration of, what coaches are being paid, these buyouts, that's now accelerating the timelines for them to have to win. And it's creating this environment of instant reward, which goes away from the traditional recruit the right kids at the high school level, develop them so they can play by the time they're second or third year. And I get it on both ends. There's a piece of me that, not that I feel bad for the coaches, because they're the ones in most cases being paid a lot of money. But they're now in a position of, it's really hard to build a program and build a culture when you might not even be given 2 years anymore to build a shelf life. And then I get it on the high school kids side, because they're trying to make the best educated decision for themselves and their family. And then there's all these moving parts at once. So it's a long-winded way of saying, yes, I believe the calendar and how college football is being run now is broken. I don't claim to have the magic wand to solve all the problems, but I do think we got to get a better timeline in place where the signing day gets more in line with the timelines of how the season's ending and the portal opening. But having them staggered the way they are right now is just a recipe for utter chaos, candidly.
Yeah, I don't have the magic wand either, but I do also feel for the college coaches, take the money out of it, like you said, because you do. You need to recruit high school. You need to recruit everyone else's roster, right, via the transfer portal. And I think the real kicker is you need to re-recruit your own roster every single year because everyone else is trying to recruit your young men that are currently on campus. And like you said, with a very condensed time frame, and if you do well enough to get to the college football playoff, then the entire portal is closed by the time you're done playing. The only thing that can happen at that point is your kids from your team can go in the portal for a week or two after you are done playing. Um, yeah, it's hard to even wrap heads around, but it's probably an off-season conversation. So I appreciate you
Yeah,
indulging us
absolutely.
with that here today. So let's talk about the game. Great venue. You know it well. You've done some great things on that field, Brett, set records that still stand at Villanova University. How does it feel to be going back to Villanova and at a stadium that can do 10 to 12,000, I think, standing or fans? What do you think about a packed house on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, two bitter rivals? It doesn't get much better.
Yeah, I'm really excited for both teams and for this game to be at a venue like a Villanova, which to me is where it belongs. It's certainly a facility that can handle the expected crowd, but also not be in too big of an environment where it doesn't feel like, the game's kind of packed and all that. So I'm glad it was able to work out. Villanova's on a bye this week, so that made it a lot easier. Villanova's been very engaging. I'm certainly an alumnus there. I stay in touch with a lot of people there. They've made it very clear that moving forward, they want to be big supporters of local football programs. And certainly when you talk LaSalle and St. Joe's, to get that type of foot traffic on their campus in this type of venue with what's going to be at stake Saturday, I think it's a great scenario for everybody. I've actually been on campus the last 2 weeks, both Saturdays. I've been a guest color analyst for the radio broadcast for Villanova that came up this offseason. So I agreed to do 2 games. So I've actually been back on the campus both Saturdays the last 2 weeks. So certainly brings back a lot of great memories. Again, I think it's a perfect venue for this game. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for our kids to play in a great environment with a lot at stake. And I know both schools and both alumni groups are super excited. And Saturday can't get here fast enough.
Real quick, how was the experience working with the Villanova radio network and specifically Ryan Fannin, who feels like he's been doing this forever at this point?
Yeah, Ryan was doing the color commentary back in my playing days, so he's been there for a while. He has a tremendous passion for Villanova sports in general. He's then migrated into being the play-by-play for Villanova basketball. Um, to get to see him the last 2 weeks and catch up on old times and memories has been a lot of fun. He certainly is a very talented radio voice himself, and I thought we had a good time, played well off one another, and so that part was pretty exciting. I was trying to enjoy the moment of being up in a press box, not very stressed out in that stadium last Saturday, knowing that certainly my heart rate will probably be a little bit different come Saturday at 1 o'clock.
That's great. Well, and what do you think a key will be? Is there anything you learned from game one that you'll apply in game two?
I think, if you look at where we were on October 4th as a team, I think we were still trying to work some things out. Truly identify for us what our identity is going to be on both sides of the ball. And just continuing to fine tune and focus as a coach of, hey, what are we really good at? I think oftentimes in big games, and I can be guilty of this, I have been guilty of this, where you almost overthink certain things and trying to figure out, all right, we got to come up with some specific secret sauce to create a competitive advantage. And sometimes it's the opposite of what you should be doing, which is say, hey, and what we've been working on with our coaches is saying, what are we good at? What are our players good at? And then let's make sure as we prepare, we prepare for various scenarios. But ultimately, how do we get to Saturday with our kids feeling an incredibly high level of confidence that we can just go out, play with confidence, and really just let it all hang out on the field Saturday?
What have you seen from St. Joe's Prep in the last 4 weeks? I'm certain you've been doing some film study, not just this week, but since October 4th. How do you feel St. Joe's Prep, from your vantage point, from your film study, has prepared for this matchup?
They've proven all year long that they're an incredibly resilient team. If you look at the schedule the Adel League schedule they played was probably as tough as any program in the entire country with who they had on the schedule. So they went through a very grueling physical opening 4 or 5 games. Certainly didn't have the win-loss record that I'm sure they wanted. However, I know why they do that. It's to prepare them for the home stretch and the playoff run. So then they play us. They come up a little bit short. Then they go out and play Roman, and Roman took them down to the wire. But I think that game was probably an important turning point for Prep's team. Is they showed their resilience in a comeback there in the fourth quarter to win in that type of emotional way. I'm sure build up a lot of their confidence, and then they've been rolling there ever since with the remaining of the Catholic League schedule. So I think when you look at both teams, there's a lot of parallels as far as probably how they feel right now at this point of the season. Certainly how we feel. We have a tremendous amount of respect for certainly their team, their program. We know that, in order to win this game Saturday, we from a LaSalle standpoint are going to have to go out there and take it from them.
I can't wait. I know you guys can't wait. I think both fan bases have been looking forward to this, knowing that this game was always the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, if you will, that this game was always written in the stars. And we're going to be out there broadcasting the game on Bob Long Sports, just the way we always do. Want to give a shout out to the Philadelphia Catholic League for working with us on that. Again, a lot of these games, you see it when it comes to basketball season, will be behind a paywall. We felt that wasn't the best thing for the young men in terms of showcasing them, showcasing the program, and showcasing the league as a whole. That's not my call. That's the league's call. And so I give them all the credit in the world for feeling the same way, working with us, and getting this on the air for free. So, Brett, have a terrific week leading up to it, and have a great time on Saturday. We can't wait to see you there.
Thanks, Bob. See you Saturday.